No, I mean, architecture is political. We gotta add that stuff.
Indeed.
We're tearing down communities to build multifamily, and you have to understand we are creating displacement. You're displacing Black and brown folks, and they don't come back.
Half of this podcast would be dedicated to the history of Tyler House, my journey and my discoveries, and hey, I'm going to solve this housing problem.
Hey guys, what's up? My name is Melisa Daniels. This is the Architecturalist Political Podcast where Black and brown folks talk about architecture. I hope you enjoyed this podcast and be part of my storytelling. I have a question. How many Melisas have you encountered in the architectural world? Well, here's another one. I met Melisa through Writing the Vortex, and her journey into architecture is amazing. She's a Midwest girl coming from St. Louis to be exact. And we just talked about her trajectory and her passion for community-centered design. A WashU grad, as well as she teaches there. We talk about just growing up and working on projects in her childhood neighborhood. So I'm keeping this intro short and sweet so we get to the meat of this. You'll notice that I changed the outro. Again, if you want to support this podcast, just go online. We recently changed platforms. Unfortunately, Glow.fm will be no longer. I picked Glow because it was a women-owned business. And since then, it got sold and I think sold again. And unfortunately, in these times, when that happens and companies end up sunsetting them, just go on the website. The website's still there. arcispolly.online, and I will be using Buy Me a Coffee. So check out this phenomenal episode, and here you go. Hi, Melisa.
Hi, Melissa.
How often do you do that?
Never. Especially with like another Black woman. Like Black Melissas are so far and like few in between.
I do have a good friend also named Melisa, so shout out to her.
Shout out to the other Melissa. I bet she's amazing.
Yeah, she's Black too. So
Okay.
yeah, in this industry.
Oh, and in the industry. Well, then we all just need to be friends.
We need to all just take a selfie or something together.
Yes. We're linked for life now.
I know.
Yeah. There's a song by Lizzo and Missy Elliott, Tempo. And I consider that my anthem because it's two Black Melissas singing songs about
right.
So it's like, oh, this is for me.
And Lizzo's in the Midwest. She's a Midwesterner.
She's a Midwester too. Yeah.
So how's the weather been?
Oh, it's been all over the place. You know, one day it's global warming-ish stuff, rain and tornadoes. Oh, we have a lot of tornadoes here, so that's been our vibe. Has been some tornado warnings. How about you?
Right now, it's kind of cold and wet.
Oh.
So it's been like that for the past week.
Yeah. I love spring, but yeah, I need a little sunshine every now and then.
So for the audience, how did we meet?
We met on a panel, writing the Vortex panel when you guys came to St. Louis. Yeah, it was great. It was a wonderful panel, and yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Have you heard of Writing the Vortex before?
I did, actually. Through Noma and a friend of mine, Vanessa, had told me about Writing the Vortex. So I was a part of the Facebook group and some other stuff and had been following what y'all were doing. I think I learned more as we went for the process for the panel.
So what we usually do if we find a city is that we scour the internet and our networks to find Black women in this profession. And your name came up repeatedly. And I was like, all right, a Black Melisa. I was so excited to first be in your hometown and meeting you. How did you feel about our panel presentation? If you can remember that long ago.
Yeah, I'm remembering it. No, it was great that y'all were there in St. Louis. I think we had a discussion right before the panel, and you're like, how many Black designers are there here? And I was like, you want to hear some bleak numbers? And it's funny that you found me, because when it comes to sitting on like panels, I actually normally reject them. I have this like St. Louis, it tends to be when I'm on a panel, I'm in a room full of white folks talking about Black issues, and they nod and they like do their thing. And then afterwards, like, they don't give me a job. They don't help anything towards the pipeline. And so I'm like, why waste my time to make them feel great about whatever the situation is? It sucks out here. And like, I just want you to know it sucks out here. So I was actually like, I don't know. But then I saw it was y'all, and I was like, you know what? Actually, I'm going to do this. And for me, it was great because I was in the presence of other Black women in architecture. And so I really like didn't care so much about the audience that we were talking to. I was more so like, I'm excited to just be in the presence of other people and hear y'all's stories alongside of mine, and then be able to like have some like direct conversations. The audience did end up like being like pretty interesting, actually. There were some great long-standing architects in the room from St. Louis. And then the chair of my undergraduate program where I teach at WashU was there. So that was nice to have them. And then there were some people from NOMA, and we have a little group chat of Black women in architecture. She saw us online, or like virtually, and was like, you know what, actually I'm gonna go and be in the room. So she drove to the panel, in the middle of the panel, just to make sure that she was like in the room. So that was really nice.
That was amazing. So one thing, it was an intimate crowd.
Yeah.
And so once we were done, we took audience questions, and they told us, like, you have a large virtual crowd. And I was like, oh, okay. And then the fact that woman, that she just came, she's like, I was watching you guys online. I just had to physically come here to witness this. That was amazing.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. Yeah, I thought it was an amazing day. It was way past my expectations, just knowing what like panels are in St. Louis. So I was really excited that we went as long as we did and had such good conversation.
And then this let us know that it's the power that we have, and the community that we have. Total strangers.
Yeah.
Total strangers. It was a roll of the dice when we asked, strangers to come and present. And to just see the support is just, I just love our community.
It's very true. Yeah. There's nothing like it. There's nothing like it.
So why architecture?
Why architecture? Ooh, that's a deep, big question. I like, whenever I like talk about my practice, I always frame it as like, I wanted to do this since I was really little. And of course, my like motivations have changed over time. When I was young, it was like everything touches architecture. Like every environment you're in has to be designed by an architect, every single one. And so wanting to be a part of that, and wanting to be a part of something that is permanent and can touch many different facets of people, facets of life, that sort of thing. And now it's kind of changed. It's changed several times. I think as I like get deeper in my career, that motivation changes quite a bit. But for me right now, it's giving people agency, helping to give people agency through the built environment, and then also helping people to understand complexities within the built environment and how they're designed. I think that's the thing that like, I went to school, like grad school in the same city that I grew up, which is here in St. Louis. And it's like I had this lived experience, and then I had this learned experience of like studying architecture in the city that I grew up in. And all of a sudden it like things clicked for me. It was like, oh, this is this way because someone designed it to be this way, not because it doesn't have design. And it's because there's this over programming of design that has happened. And then this is a system, and it's a cycle, and it actually replicates itself, not just in St. Louis, but it also replicates itself in other places of the world. Like I studied abroad quite a bit while I was in grad school. And part of that was because I was like, let me just go ahead and like balance this like very local experience with like some global perspective. And just seeing the same racial relationships, same built systems of like redlining and discrimination and all those things, showing those show up in the built environment in other countries at the same rate in the same ways. I was like, oh, okay, this is meant to do what it's doing right now. And helping people to understand that like not everything that they are going through at that moment is something that hasn't been impacted by someone else's hands. And so like being able to like put voice to that has been really what's been keeping me afloat now as a designer.
How were you introduced to architecture?
I started drawing really young. I had like a very complicated childhood, but around 5 years old, I started drawing people in buildings, and I really just liked drawing people in buildings. And me being the inquisitive person I was, I like looked up what that meant, like what if there were people who drew buildings, like who were the people who designed it. And so I really found it through that. It wasn't until undergrad that I understood like why there's not a lot of us in the field. And I actually caught a video of, I think it was Craig Wilkins. Yeah. Had done a talk and was talking about like being Black and in architecture and like what that disparity looks like. And that was the first time that I like actually kind of understood why I couldn't find any faculty members that looked like me, why I didn't really see a lot of representation in my community and things like that. And so that changed like my trajectory, I think, quite a bit at that moment. I reached out to my local NOMA, which there was no local NOMA when I was in undergraduate school. And so I had to reach back out to St. Louis because I was not in St. Louis for undergrad, and found a mentor, and it's been like rolling ever since.
How was your undergrad experience and grad experience at WashU?
Oh, undergrad was great. I went to a state school. I went to the University of Missouri in Columbia, and I had really great professors who like supported me in a lot of aspects. It was also like a little family. Like we were a small school with a small program, kind of tucked in a weird area of the college. Like no one knew architecture actually existed at the school. So I would run into people on campus and they'd be like, "What are you saying? I didn't even know we had that." And that was nice to like have a little family on campus. We were a very tight-knit group. We still kind of are a little bit of a tight-knit group. Graduate school was different, though. Graduate school was like the first time where I experienced class in a very direct way in architecture school. I also got a lot more of a global perspective. There were way more international students. There were more international professors. And so like that was a difference of speed and understanding for me. It's funny because undergrad was also like, it's a state school, so it was more fun than going to grad school at a private school. And I'm glad I did it that way. I think I needed the reprieve and then to like switch into a very focused lens of what I was doing after that.
So you graduated and you started working at a firm right away?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How was that? And I'm moving towards your choice of entrepreneurship, of owning your own business.
Sure. It was interesting. So I only worked for 3 firms post-graduate school before I decided to go out on my own. And all of them were very distinct in their own ways. But I felt like I got the full architecture experience through those 3 firms. One was the first one I worked for was a very small Black-owned firm. But interestingly enough, once I had a design rep, I was at a different firm at that point, and she was like, "Oh, you worked for what firm?" And I told her the name, and she's like, "Are they actually a firm? Or are they just like a firm to be like a minority firm to be a minority firm?" And I was like, that's kind of the thing. Like that was kind of the thing. They loved to like partnership contract. They weren't really doing like crazy great design. And I didn't really feel supported very much in that firm. And then I left very shortly, like after I was like, if this is architecture, I will not last. I left and worked for a smaller boutique firm that had fabrication also assigned to it. So it was like half fabrication, half architecture firm. And I loved that environment, like getting to build with contractors and like understand the complexity of like specialty pieces. We designed a lot of like hotels and restaurants and things like that. Some like residential stuff. But I still wasn't really feeling like a ton of fulfillment within that. So I decided to jump scales. I was like, I want to work for a bigger firm and I want to work on bigger projects because I think I have this like urban design background as well. And I was like, maybe I need like a city context. Maybe I need to be able to do that. And that firm is where all hell broke loose. I call it like the series of unfortunate events, but it was not a good fit for me. And it was not a good fit just in general, I think. I worked a lot with developers, and I got to see firsthand what developers say, especially about Black communities, and didn't jive well with me. I was also the only Black woman in the office, and so they like loved the diversity, but also like didn't know what to do with me. If I was quiet, I was standoffish. If I was loud, I was aggressive. So there was like, I was starting to lose my own identity within working in that practice, and I couldn't reconcile that. So I actually did a little soft quit where I quit architecture because I just needed like a mental break. I needed a break.
How long were you there?
I was there for about 2 years. It's not crazy long. And then I quit kind of soft. And then I fully quit afterwards and started my own practice.
Were you doing stuff at the side at the time, or you just took a pause and then you jumped into your own thing?
Yeah, so when I took the pause, I started working on the side for another architect because at the time I wasn't licensed. I was taking my licensure exams, but I wasn't licensed yet. And so I was just like helping him with drawings and like client interactions and interfacing and all that stuff. And he's like a well-established architect and was great. It actually provided me a lot more mentorship than any of my other practices really did. And it was funny because as I was doing this like moonlighting on the side and like trying to understand what I wanted to do within architecture is when like I actually didn't want to start a practice. I was like, my whole trajectory was I was going to wait until I was, 50 or something like that. And I was going to work at a practice for like, 20 years and siphon all my clients. And then that would be my like practice start. That was how I envisioned my life. So when I stepped out and I was like, oh, there's no way, I'm too young. I like don't have enough experience. I can't do this. This is not my goal. But it was actually my husband who kept like prodding me because I would do something and I'd go after something and he'd be like, oh, so you have a practice? And I was like, no, I don't. I'm just moonlighting. I'm just doing it on the side. He's like, okay, so you have a practice? And I was like, nope, don't have a practice. I'm just hanging out over here doing architecture stuff. I'm just going after a project. I'm just pulling together a business plan. I don't have a practice. Not practice. Just trying to, be smart. And he was like, you have a practice. And so after a while, I was like, I have a practice. Oh, crap. So that's how it started, actually. So, yeah.
So it came together in pieces. It did, right? Like you said. So when was that point where you're like, I'm going to get an LLC? When did that happen? Because once you do that.
Yeah, I know. We celebrate it as BlackArc Day here because it's the day that I got the LLC. I actually sat down. It was a random Thursday, like not even. So when I took that pause and I was trying to figure out, what I wanted to do, one of the things I wanted to do was I needed to practice with my whole self is how I described it. Because I felt like I was tamping down like my identity as a Black woman who lived in the city, who dealt with these like really complex social situations as a like child and growing up and then in school and all these things. And I couldn't talk about those things openly where I was. And I couldn't practice with those things at all. So I like decided I was going to go every place where I knew there wasn't an architect. I was like, I'm going to find these moments. I'm going to be in rooms where there's not an architect and I'm just going to be there. And there was this event here in St. Louis called the Community Builders Network. It was like their yearly like awards ceremony. I mean, the Community Builders Network, they're like a network of planners and some designers, mostly planners, and CDCs and neighborhood organizations and nonprofits that all are doing work related to community building in St. Louis. And they do these awards. So I showed up to this award ceremony. I don't even know how I got invited to it. And as I was there, we all were wearing name tags and people were like, oh, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I'm an architect. And they were like, oh, well, thank you for being here. And I was like, okay. But I was like, this is weird. We're in a community builders. I'm like, why are you thanking me? I know. I was like, are there other architects here? Because I was like, there's have to be. We're in a builders network. Like all of these projects that you're talking about that are getting awards are built pieces of things. Like I'm like, well, there has to be an architect here. And I was like walking around the room and there was not one architect present, but all of the awards were like we broke ground on this thing. We like opened this building. We designed this particular space. And I was like, well, then where are the architects? Like, why are they not in the room right now? And so that's kind of the jumping point of where my practice started. Was I was just like, architects are being involved way too late in the process. One, it's like after all of the social things have been navigated. It's after a program has been set. They know what they want to do already. And they just basically call it an architect to like draw the plans on the site. And there it is. And I was like, actually, we need to be involved a little bit earlier in this process because we do have these like amazing skills of like how to orchestrate and visualize and communicate. And I was like, I can do all of those things. And I like doing those things. I like doing those things with community folks. And so I was like, you know what, I'm going to actually just like start this practice to just exist in those moments where I can like help a community vocalize what they need to an architect before the architect like starts designing it. And then also help them like think about it and strategize in ways that they might not have that vantage point because they're not designers and they're not thinking about the built environment in that way. So that's really where like the thought of starting a practice opened up for me.
That's amazing that you are thinking that way. I know, like, when I met you afterwards, we all went to dinner. Even when you were telling your stories and then I got to talk to you afterwards, I was just like, damn, Melissa, like, where have you been? Like, I was like, where have you been? Like, because even that thought process of like being in spaces that architects aren't in, they don't think like that at all.
Yeah.
They kind of just stay in that little bubble and rely on like ULI or,
Mhm.
Something similar in that nature, or even AIA in those bubbles and hopefully try to get those people. But it's just that thought.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it was really just like, I don't hang out with a ton of architects. Like that's why like my friends and family are all outside of architecture. And I found that like architects sometimes get stuck in this moment of like, let's hang out with other architects who are speaking the exact same thing that we're speaking. And we don't understand all these other forces that are sort of like influencing design and the process. And so we kind of understand it from our lens, but like where I find that the work gets like rich and deep and wonderful for me is when I'm pulling in a voice that is not a formal architect, but is doing all of the architect things, is doing all the practice things. They're already designing, they're already building all of the things. And that's actually like how I modeled my company. So I'm very small. BlackArc is very small. It's 2 people now. And every time we enter a project, we look for who are the people who are building already and have that knowledge. And then we hire them as the team. And so for every project, we'll hire somewhere between 2 and like 6 people to join our team and design with us. And that's purely to give us a very specific knowledge of place and space and systems that we are going to see as a fly-in architect. We're not going to be able to like just come in and get that vantage point. So we need those people to be a part of the team. And then also, like for me, it's always about like amplifying and sustaining and building capacity as well. So in this, I'm like, okay, I'm learning so much from you, but I also want you to know these are how I'm thinking about things. And this is how I've learned these particular things by working with developers. This is how you ask for it. This is how you advocate for it. This is how it could show up in the built environment. I find that like people sometimes need the ability to dream big. And I didn't dream big until I really got into architecture. And I was like, oh, this has been done before. And this is really cool. Or you could do it like this. And there's all these different like precedents that I can tap into. And that's not available to people who are not in architecture. They don't know that those things exist. And so it's part of like giving a little window into like, there's some other really cool things that we can do so that they have the ability to like dream big outside of a circumstance that we're designing for.
That's an interesting business model. It's like per project based.
Mm-hmm.
So you look at the needs of that project and you build a team around that instead of having an established team and just figure out your take on what the community needs.
Yeah. Part of that was out of like kind of necessity. And part of that was out of like how I started the practice. So one thing I realized was I had sort of two lenses that I would have feedback on. And one would be like sort of less formal people who are doing the work, but just like aren't specialized designers. And then I also had a group of friends and collaborators that like have a very specific like knowledge base around something that was specific to the project. So sometimes it's like I need a landscape architect. Sometimes I need like another planner to sit on something. And I could tap them also as like these like smaller skilled vantage points. And so like I think about it as like this model of like sometimes I'm pulling in people who are like skilled in a very complex relationship that we are going to have to interrogate as designers. And sometimes, well, all the time I'm tapping in with the people who are like spearheading and like creating this project or the container in which we're making this project.
One of the organizations that you belong to is the Association of Community Designers, ACD. How did you find that community?
Yeah, so that's a funny story too. I was starting this practice and like really very new and like starting the practice in the way I wanted to practice. And a colleague, actually, I think it was a couple colleagues, sent me there was a fellowship that was opening for ACD. And I was like, oh, ACD is like community designer. I'm like, okay, wait, this is like kind of what I'm doing. So other people are doing this. And I talk sometimes about like St. Louis sometimes feels like an island. A lot of times there's so much focus, I think, on the coasts. Like we can talk about East Coast and we can talk about West Coast, like designers, and there's energy and there's a lot of like talented professionals, especially Black professionals in architecture and design. And St. Louis is in the middle of very sea of red, conservative, sometimes very like rural space. And St. Louis is like not rural in itself, but it's still kind of like small city. And so like it's hard to find that collaboration. And so I was like, oh, actually going on this fellowship, I'm going to like expand my relationships with people who are doing this work or similarly aligned work outside of St. Louis. So hopefully I can like be more resilient in that way, because I was like, I was not planning to like start this practice. So I would love to have more people who are doing similar things. And Shalini, who ran the fellowship, pulled together like this amazing cohort of women of color. And I think it was 6 of us or something like that for the like inaugural cohort of this fellowship. And when I tell you like they are like my collaborators and my girls forever, they really are. Like I just got done talking to 2 of them. We like said we have a group chat and like are always sending messages back and forth. But we weathered some really difficult things together. So like when I started my practice in 2019, we all met up for the fellowship in 2019, and then we all know what happened in 2020. And so we all had to weather that through the fellowship together. Then even our first meeting for the fellowship was at the ACD conference, which was in Greenwood, Mississippi that year. So we like met up for the first time in the middle of Mississippi.
Wow.
It's very rural, very Black, poverty line, all the things, and then like very strong undertones of racism like that I had never experienced. And we like were forged in the fire, I guess you could say. And now we're all collaborators and we're all still weathering like how we build practice and stay afloat and exist as women and women of color in this practice. Yeah.
And you're also active in design as a protest.
Mhm.
Yeah. Dealing with these issues. And I'm glad there's a community that you can always go back to. But how are you handling it? When you see stuff like this, or when you experience stuff, when you're, trying to anti-design some of these spaces, how have you been handling that?
Ooh, it's a struggle sometimes. I have learned that like you have to be careful when you work in a field where others' traumas mirror your own. So it can get to like the double whammy of trauma. Like there's a project that we did here in St. Louis, and I actually did it with Co-Locate, and the little signs behind me are actually from that project. But it was re-envisioning the workhouse. And so the workhouse here is a medium security institution, a jail that was closed by activists because it was essentially like this debtor's prison where they were holding people for long periods of time just because they couldn't make bail over things that were nonviolent crimes. So traffic tickets, being late on child support, all sorts of those things that were not violent offenses, but they were holding people for years in the prison, and people were dying and people were having their lives completely upended. And so activists came and shuttered it. And then we were invited to help them reimagine what that space could be now that it was shuttered as a way to hopefully make sure that it never reopened. And so I worked on that project with Brian Lee at Colocate, who has founded DAP as well. And that was one of those projects where I've had family members who have been in the workhouse, incarcerated in the workhouse. I know what that looks like to have these like racist systems and policies like affect your family and upend parts of your family. And it was difficult. It was a difficult moment to carry. As I've developed this practice, I've also had to be in therapy all the time because it was a lot of like
Yeah.
unlearning. Yeah, it was a lot of like figuring out how do I, as a Black woman, navigate these spaces and design in these spaces, but also make it in a way that doesn't rip me apart, because that's what can happen.
Yeah, you still continue. You're still doing your thing.
Yeah. I will say right now it's rough. I don't know how you're doing. And this time it is rough.
Girl, oh my gosh. And I was questioning even this podcast, right? Because yeah, I don't want to keep talking about this. Like, I'm bringing this up to you, but
Yeah.
I don't want to keep talking about what's going on in the world or how it will affect us in the future, or yell and scream that history is repeating itself. So it's like, but I really wanted to talk to you though.
I know.
Now I'm doing this once a month.
Okay.
But these are topics like you can't help yourself. You can't, it's like something in you that's just like, this is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
We need to make this right.
It's true. It's hard. It's hard to like not want to intervene every time that I can. Because that also is like too much. There's times where I've like taken on more than I can chew, sort of thing. And now I have a little one too. And so I'm like trying to like mentally be here to like raise a child who's not like, my mom is someone who she's helping me design the community and is losing it at home. Like, it's just always losing it. So I don't want to be that parent. So it's really hard sometimes to like balance that. And it's also, I feel that with like the not wanting to talk about it all the time. I'm finding though that like I only talk about it now with people who understand it and have a dog in the fight kind of thing. Like when we talk about panels and being invited on panels, I get invited on panels all the time. And part of it is like, I'm the Black woman in St. Louis. I'm the Black woman in Missouri, where there's, 8 of us that are licensed, like licensed architects in Missouri, like in general. And people are like, well, you're the only one I know, so you should talk about this. And if I get asked one more time about like how to expand the pipeline, I think my brain might explode a little bit.
Your brain might be expanding.
Exactly. I actually have this little joke that I have with my husband, but I had told him next time I'm invited on a panel and they like have a fee associated with it, I was just going to put the fee in a little bucket of money. And anytime they asked me about like, how do we encourage more people of color to be within the architecture field, I was just going to look for a person of color in the crowd and write them a check based off of that fee. And that was the answer to it. That's it. That's all. Pay Black folks and give them jobs and leave them alone. Like, I don't know how else to put that.
You just solved a lot of problems with those 3 things. You solved it.
Right? Like, it really isn't that hard. I'm like, I'm
Not that
kinda
hard.
tired of saying it and then people being like, oh my God, that's so deep. No, it's not. It's so
No,
easy.
it's not at all. It's not at all.
Yeah. It's funny. My mug actually says that too. It says,
No, wait, what? What does it say?
it says pay Black women for their labor instead of using them for diversity clout. That's what, like, it's my when I mean business mug, I bring it in meetings sometimes.
Let's talk about design. That's the thing that I'm thinking of trying to move more towards. What's your approach on design? Like, did you unlearn all the things they taught you?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I unlearned it. It's more so been like I've adapted it. I've adapted it to be more inclusive of other voices as part of that process. Like I enjoy designing with people. So part of the process is always like doing what I call a landscape scan of like who's in the room, who should be in the room, who isn't in the room, what around it is already joyful and beautiful, and how do we just amplify that work is a lot of the work. I like systems designing, so I'm always like looking for the systems, looking for like what are the historical patterns that have happened in a space. And I'm also, when it comes to like design, like capital D design, I'm always looking for what is happening sort of currently in other cultures. Like I think I'm like outside of the realm of like Scandinavian or European design being this thing that mirrors vibrancy. So I spent some time, I took this little mini sabbatical, it was just like a little vacation, to visit one of my friends who's living in Mexico. And she's an artist and she lives in San Miguel. And I spent time there and I just realized like every building was painted this like beautiful, vibrant color. And I was like, why don't we have more vibrant colors in the United States of America? And it didn't matter like if it was someone above the poverty line or below the poverty line, like they all had these like magenta painted buildings and like these vibrant blues. And like just being in that environment, like cleared my brain. And it was like I was going through a bunch just like professionally and like personally and all that stuff. And so taking the little break, I was like, I need a little mental respite. But I was like, it's so much easier to take a little mental break when I'm surrounded by color and beauty all the time. And even if it's like has a backdrop of something that's not perfect, it's so nice to just have color. And I think that's a like tool of like sort of oppression is to remove the color.
Really, it is. Oh my gosh, it's like a crime.
It is.
I'm in the educational space, and one thing that I've noticed is that they're now muting the colors, and the reason why is, the colors are too stimulating for kids. Like that was the thing. And my personal take was, so you're saying that other cultures, their kids are overly stimulated? Are you saying like Mexican culture? Pick any African country, right? Any,
Yeah, exactly. Right.
even other countries, I can't even think of any. But that's my point, right? Like the iPad stimulates the damn kids more.
Exactly. Well, also like the earth is colorful. Like the thing that is
The
the
earth is
most
colorful,
natural to us as human beings in an ecosystem is colorful. Like it dulls down sometimes. And like I think that that's the balance is you have to have the balance of like when to be stimulating and when to like, take a period of rest. Like when think about the seasons. But like flowers are colorful for a reason. Like, like these things are like I'm trying to bring a lot more of that vibrancy back. Color, texture, pattern. I'm really like getting inspired by pattern. And what's been kind of nice is like I've been working also. So one of my other many hats is I'm a director of community engagement for an arts triennial here in St. Louis. So I'm working with artists and they're thinking about color and they're thinking about like expression through like different mediums and forms and all of that. And I'm like, that should be brought back into architecture. Like there's a level of like having things that are natural, that are wonderful and beautiful. And then then we add also color to that. And paint is really inexpensive. We can really do a lot of things.
It's really is one of the cheapest things that you can do to transform a space.
Exactly. And your mood just shifts when you do that. So that's one of the things I've been doing just in design wise. And so like all of even when I'm designing like graphic materials, they're colorful. This thing behind me is like bright blue and like lavender and things like that. And it's just to like evoke a sense of like positivity.
Mm-hmm. It wakes you up.
Yeah, it does.
One last thing, working with the community, when you do these charrettes or what have you, sometimes they get stuck, right? There's someone in the audience who loves purple and they want purple on everything. Or you notice that they are equating certain things with what they've seen on TV or what they've experienced. So, how do you work with those limitations and to try to expand? Or do you?
Yeah, it gets tricky sometimes. And it doesn't come out so much just because of the way I think our process starts out is like we do so much grounding work in the beginning that we kind of get that stuff out early. We get all of the like visioning big early. And then we like marry that with the realities of like what we can do with a budget or context and things like that. And sometimes we break it, like, and sometimes we just like, we go against that grain. People are influenced by things that are around them that are currently modeled as being vibrant or beautiful or aesthetically pleasing. And that's just it. Like it happens and shifts and cycles. Like it used to be like everything was minimal and everybody wanted to be minimal. And now all of a sudden seeing like this like cottage core pop up where people are like, I want things to be so much like my grandmother's house. And, we go through those cycles of like we swing one way to the other. I think I'm like of the mindset that as a designer, I should be able to facilitate that. Like I should be able to like support that in some ways, not just come in with like, well, Mies van der Rohe said, and like really like be like, well, okay, but why do you love that? What about that is cool to you? Like, especially when I'm working with like youth, I'm like, tell me why. Like, what about this makes you feel this way? And sometimes it's just like, I don't know, it just does. Sometimes though, it's much deeper and it takes us a while to get to that point. It's like, oh, well, whenever I experience like warmth, I always associate it with this color. Whenever I am experiencing a place that I feel safe, it's because I equate it to this thing that was like in my past that was related to something else. And so then we can draw connections and we can build on those connections instead of building on like a fad. And then that gives people agency and makes them like buy into what they're designing at that point.
How does all this tie into you working at WashU and these kids, not kids, but they aren't adults, but these students? What is their reactions to these things when you bring the stuff up?
Yeah. It kind of depends on whether I'm talking to undergraduate students or if I'm talking to graduate students. Graduate students, in my opinion, are a little more jaded I don't know if it's by the field, by life.
Is the tuition number. That's what it is. They're like,
Yeah.
I gotta pay this 6 figures back. But yeah.
Exactly. It might very well be that. So undergraduate students tend to be like, okay, yeah, I can do whatever I want. Like, I try to give them agency to like do whatever they want to do, but I want them to ground it in a principle, like ground it in something that is the context in which we're designing. So like this year I'm working with undergraduate students and they're designing firehouses. And I'm like, at the barest minimum, we have to be able to get a fire truck in this firehouse. Like that to them is mind blowing. Like they're like, oh, I guess I didn't really consider that.
Oh yes, yeah. I guess I gotta make this big enough.
Exactly. And sometimes they want to go on that track of like, well, this looks cool, this feels cool. And I'm like, but okay, but as an architect, we have to also consider life safety. We have to consider like the surrounding environment. Like I tell them when they get a site, they're married to that site. Like sometimes we do things that are sightless to kind of help them understand and gear up their like, get their like design skills sort of up and running. But I'm like, but when I introduce that site is, you are bound to that site for the rest of the semester. So I want to see it every time because that helps you to contextualize your building as not an object, but you're building as a part of a system. It's a part of a street facade. It's a part of an intersection. It's a part of a community. All of those things are the things you have to design to. And so you have to draw it first. And similarly with this like firehouse situation is like, draw a fire truck because if our client is a firefighter, they have to be able to like put a truck in there. Like we have to get to like the basics of what people need. and not let that be overridden by aesthetics or our own vision for a particular space. Graduate students, though, it's a little bit different. Lately, I've been teaching a class called Design Culture. And so that class is kind of open-ended the way that it's structured. But since I've been teaching it, it's been really about like building a coalition. Like for me, like coalition building has been like the thing that's been repetitive in my practice lately. And it's like, how do you build a group of people who are like-minded or similarly aligned, but can be supportive so that you can build some resiliency into the way that you practice. And so I'm asking them because I think COVID kind of did us a little bit of a disservice in studio culture, where people used to have to be in studio together and collaborate. And like you had people you loved, you had people you hated, you've worked it out though. And now they don't have that. They know how to like go fully digital and be on Zoom and like have these and that's opened up a lot of doors, but it's also closed a lot of doors. And so the class is really situated in a way where I'm like, turn it on yourselves. And actually, I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. And I want to see where the connections are between you all, because you are a cohort, regardless of whether or not you practice together later. You are a line of thought in architecture right now that is going to perpetuate. Like I have a group of people who I went to school with, and we all are making waves in our own careers. And sometimes it's collaborative and sometimes we're not in the same realms, but we all were sort of educated at this one point. So treat graduate school as like, these are my peers. And where do I find the people who I'm going to align with later on as I'm practicing, or the people I'm not? Like, how do I understand design through the field of and the vision of my peers?
Any projects you're working on right now?
Yeah, there's a couple projects. One I'm not working on because I got rejected, unfortunately, which that's a whole long story. But two of them are actually in the neighborhoods that I grew up. One is a development project.
I love that.
Yeah, I'm very excited about the development project. It's in Hamilton Heights, which is where my great-grandmother's house is. But it's a young Black woman who's a developer who's developing this community center / laundromat. And we're pulling from some inspiration that I had when I was in Mexico of inner courtyards and what that could mean for an urban environment. The neighborhood is one that has had issues with crime, but is also on the cusp of people starting to want to develop in that area. So it's in this very fragile moment. And so we've been talking about inner courtyards as a way to make something ultra vibrant on the inside of it, and then be able to be protected in a way by the exterior building. And that's been really fun. And it's funny because the project is on the street that she grew up on, which is 2 blocks away from the street that I grew up on. And so we've been sort of framing it as this homecoming between both of us and our fields, changing a little bit of our neighborhood.
I love this. I always wanted that. Oh my goodness. I can't wait till it's done. I can't wait
either. It's my first, as I've been on a practice myself, ground up project. So normally I'm doing a lot of renovations or retrofits or community designs. And so this is the first, I get to be capital A architect on this one, and very excited about it.
Well, thank you, Melisa, for coming on.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. This was a joy.
I want to take this moment to thank you all for your incredible support. I really appreciate your partnership and commitment to this podcast. I also have an important update to share with you about how you can continue to support us. The folks at Glow.fm unfortunately will be winding down support for their platform by the end of August 2025. Because of that, I decided to switch over to Buy Me a Coffee instead. If you'd like to keep supporting the podcast, please head over to arcispoly.online. Your support there will help me keep these conversations going and continue to highlight the voices and stories that matter. Again, that's arcispoly, archipoly.online. Thank you so much for being part of this journey with me.